All right, and I think we're live. Welcome everyone to our Bending Towards Justice series. Today we will be discussing policy in Oregon, so it'll look like a year in review and looking forward into the short session, which is coming up shortly. I'm Beatrix Lee, the Communications and Policy Associate. So with this series, we're celebrating the end of the year with this annual week-long event. So we have covered ending solitary confinement in Oregon to youth justice. Today we're gonna debrief policy, and then tomorrow we will have a panel on policing. So we hope that you can join us tomorrow at 1. And so for today's discussion, we wanted to highlight some exciting new bills coming down the pike in the short session that OJRC and Rep. Reynolds and Senator Dembro have been partnering on. So we want to let you all know about those bills, and then from there we will move towards looking back at 2021 and just recapping the last session there. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our speakers, and I think they would do a much better job at their own bios. So Zach, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Zach Winston. I'm the Policy Director with the Oregon Justice Resource Center. It's good to be here today, and it's good to see Rep. Reynolds and Senator Dembro again as well. And yeah, the only real thing to know about me is I'm formerly incarcerated, which does tend to shape how I think about a lot of the issues and how I analyze some of the policies that are passing or not passing in Oregon. So good to be here.
And Rep. Reynolds?
Hi, my name is Lisa Reynolds. I apologize for being on the phone, but I am a state representative representing Portland's West Side, House District 36, and I am a pediatrician, which informs my work in a way as well. Thank you.
And Senator Dembro.
Hi there, I'm Michael Dembro, and I represent much of Northeast and Southeast Portland in the Oregon Senate. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, I chair the Education Committee, and am really proud to do a lot of work with OJRC and have a really strong interest in prison education and strong reentry programs for adults in custody. Look forward to talking more about all of those.
Great. Thanks so much for the intros. So Rep. Reynolds will need to head out around 2:30, so around the halfway point. So we want to make sure that we hear from Rep. Reynolds. We were just in the Restoring Voting Rights campaign kickoff, so we were just live. So we're just kind of bombarding the internet today. But Rep. Reynolds, yeah, if you could tell us about the Restoring Voting Rights Bill, what's included in it, and then what draws you to support this bill.
Great, thank you so much. For those of you who are in the previous session, this may sound a little repetitive, but so thank you so much for putting this on, OJRC, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I have the privilege of being able to work on 2 bills with OJRC this session as chief sponsor of Voting Rights Restoration, and I will plan to be a chief sponsor along with, of course, the chief sponsor, Senator Dembro, for compassionate medical release. And in my day job as a pediatrician, the issue of voting rights is a bit out of my wheelhouse, even though I do talk to 18-year-olds about the importance of voting. It's an incredibly important topic for me. And I'm thankful that OJRC and Next Up and other colleagues brought the Voting Rights Restoration Bill to my attention, and I'm excited to be introducing it. I just love the simplicity of it, the simple logic that we need to restore the right to vote to those of our neighbors who are incarcerated. And with our elections being so accessible and secure here in Oregon, it's ironic that we have a segment of our population who has had this right stripped from them. The individuals who are serving felony convictions in prison. The bill would return their right to vote while they're incarcerated and allow them to vote from their home addresses or the addresses that they voluntarily supply, which would keep that important connection with their community while they are serving out their sentence. Look, we know Oregon's a great state to vote in. We have the easiest, most foolproof voting system in the country. You know, we call it the Oregon way: vote by mail, motor voter, postage paid, and now being able to put your ballot in the mailbox on election day. It makes our system particularly suited for re-enfranchising voters. We all know the right to vote is fundamental. It upholds the foundation of our democracy, and our democracy works better when everyone is involved. We cannot continue the decades of disenfranchisement of our incarcerated neighbors. It's time for Oregon to show the country the work of a true democracy, that we extend the right to vote to more of our citizens. We do not and we will not ever strip away the right to vote. So I'm grateful to be part of today's presentation, grateful to be working on several issues with OJRC and working to ensure rights for all Oregonians. So, and now I will turn it back over to Beatrix. I will be listening for a little bit longer, but I'm in the car, and I pulled over to do this. But we'll probably not be speaking much. And Senator Dempro can take up the other topic. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Rep. Reynolds. Yeah, if Senator Dempro, kind of along the same question, what draws you to support this bill, and just your thoughts on the importance of having incarcerated people being able to vote?
Yeah, it's really interesting. My own experience with this issue goes back to just before COVID. In 2019, a group of us legislators made a trip into the Oregon State Correctional Institution and met with a number of AICs there. And this is something that, at least before COVID, we would do on a fairly regular basis. And, you know, it's such a great experience, you know, to get to know those guys. And when we visit Coffee Creek, those women, to just, you know, work with them on, you know, hearing the issues that they're really interested in. There are a number of AICs at OSCI and at Coffee Creek who are really pursuing their education while they're inside, and they're meeting together and working on different issues, whether it's juvenile justice reform or, you know, in this case, voting rights. And so we were broken up into small groups and met with the AICs who'd been doing a lot of research on different topic areas. One of them was actually related to what we'll be talking about next, that is the problem of elderly AICs and the medical challenges that they face. And then, you know, this one group was about voting rights for AICs. And I remember being kind of taken aback by it. Because, you know, as Rep. Reynolds said, we in Oregon, you know, are really proud of our, you know, access to voting, and proud that we are one of the states, you know, fortunately a growing number of states now where your voting rights get restored after release. There are still a number of states that are not doing that. And I realized when we had that conversation that we've been kind of resting on our laurels a little bit here, you know, proud that we have extended that, but really, is that all we should be doing? And I have to say, at the beginning of that conversation, I was a little skeptical, and by the end of it, I was a believer, you know, because it really, you know, it made sense for all the reasons that Rep. Reynolds said. And, you know, it really, it makes sense, especially as we're thinking of time inside being spent preparing people for life outside, whether that's through education, training programs, programs related to mental health and addictions, all of those things. And I was just really amazed, to be honest, at the high level of political awareness that the adults in custody that we met with had. I mean, they're really following the work of the legislature. They're following, electoral politics. I will say, one of the AICs said to me, knowing that I'm a Democrat, right, and a progressive Democrat, he said, I do want to warn you that most of the guys in here would probably vote for Donald Trump, and I don't want to scare you off on that. And that kind of made sense. It did not scare me off, but I think that there are some people who would be opposed to extending voting rights because they feel like this is just to get more Democratic votes, right? So that's why someone like I would be behind it. But it's really, I think, in a lot of cases, the reverse. But that's not the issue. Anyway, so I've been blabbing. Zach, you want to follow up on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can second that based on my experience being incarcerated. That I think that sometimes there's this lack of understanding about the fact that, generally speaking, although certain groups are disproportionately represented in our prisons, that it is the general population, and so you get people amongst the entire political spectrum in there. And I do think there were times where I thought to myself, that's an interesting stance on a policy, considering where I'm standing right now, and while being incarcerated. So I think one of the things that I specifically talk about with this bill a lot of times, because again, when being incarcerated, you do experience issues that you never had, I had never experienced previously, and that are really unique to those who are currently incarcerated. So one example that I use is COVID-19, which has illustrated the issues that people in prison can face. So like, for example, in October, it was reported that COVID-19 cases were 10 times higher in Oregon prisons than in the state broadly. And so when you disenfranchise people in prison, it allows the state to deprioritize their health and well-being, maintain low wages for jobs in prisons, and avoiding reducing costs of incarceration to people in prison, right? So we talk and all about kind of the different barriers that you face being released, but there's also barriers while incarcerated, and none of those really get addressed other than by some great representatives and senators who care about the issues, but it's hard to really get that across. So I think it's really important to give a vote, to give a voice to those who are currently incarcerated. And one of the things that we on the outside all know is that by casting a ballot, it's one of the most effective and loudest ways to voice your opinion on an issue. I think the only other thing I would add is that right now what we're seeing, especially with school board hearings and local elections, there's becoming a renewed interest, I would say, in them. And I think that what we sometimes forget is that people who are incarcerated have families on the outside who, are living their lives and being affected by the policies and the public bodies outside in their communities. And so I think one thing to keep in mind is that it's really important that a parent who's incarcerated be able to cast a ballot in the school, in the school board election that their child will be affected by. So that's just one other thing I would add.
Thanks, you all. And I just wanted to plug in that if you would like to support this incredible bill, with our campaign rolling out with the kickoff today, we will be having more content on social media to share. And so if you want to look out for that, and then if you would like to, continue to receive more content so that you can contact your legislators, we will be posting all of that information on our social medias. I want to be mindful of Rep. Reynolds' time if she is able to share. If not, that's okay too. But I wanted to move us into the compassionate release bill. So whether Senator Dembro or Rep. Reynolds, if she's able to share. So if you could tell us about the compensation bill and then why it is important to support.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about the compassionate release bill, which is a bill that I've been working very closely with Rep. Reynolds on. And a lot, I will say I just need to acknowledge Meda Pula, who works with Rep. Reynolds and has really been, coordinating all the work, getting this bill improved and drafted. So this is another one of those things where COVID really made us aware of insufficiencies in our system. We see this happening everywhere, where our structures, we knew they were bad, but we didn't know how bad they were. And you lay the pandemic on top of them, and you realize just how fragile they are. And as Zach mentioned, the COVID rates inside our facilities were really high. And part of that, obviously, is because they live in close proximity to one another, but also because a lot of our AICs are in poor health, actually. Some of it just due to the nature of incarceration. But even more so, I think, and this is something I alluded to before, that the AICs really made me aware of, Oregon has a much older than usual prison population. A lot of that is due to Measure 11. We have people with the mandatory minimum sentences. We have people who are inside for long periods of time. And they are aging in prison. And, many of them have serious health problems. And, and those individuals need to be released, right? We did eventually get early release for a number of AICs, but it took a long time. And it required the governor to commute their sentences. And, the way it should have worked just did not work. And like most states, Oregon has a system in place for compassionate medical release, where a person's sentence can, end early and they can be moved to care on the outside. But it almost never happens. It's a broken system. And we need to fix that system. So we started working on this last year. Not surprisingly, the issue was brought to us by OJRC after the session had begun. So we had to scramble, and it became clear that we were not going to get it done. We were able to pass it out of Senate Judiciary and send it to the Budget Committee for more work, but it was clear that we were going to need to bring people together from different advocacy groups, different interest groups, to really work on this. And we have done that nonstop since the gavel dropped at the end of the session. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing. And we have it in a form now where it's now being finally drafted. And what it does is it sets up a standing committee of medical professionals. We call it the MRAC. And I forget now what MRAC stands for exactly, but it's a group of medical professionals that will be looking at cases, initially 5 cases a month. Okay, yeah, Medical Review Advisory Committee, thank you, Meda, that Initially, while the program is getting going, they'll be looking at 5 cases a month, and looking at the nature of the person's medical condition, and letting the Board of Parole and Probation know that this individual meets unfortunately meets the qualifications for early medical release, compassionate medical release. The Board of Parole will look at them, and the presumption is that if the board, the MRAC, determines that they're really too ill to remain inside, they will be released, unless there are really strong reasons to believe that the person could be a danger on the outside, which we don't think will happen very often. If a person is in hospice, believe it or not, we have a number of AICs who are currently in hospice inside the facility. Those situations will be faster tracked. Unfortunately, this is another area in which Measure 11 really is a millstone around our necks, because people who have Measure 11 convictions won't be able to use this system and have the parole board release, because that's prohibited under the voter-approved Measure 11. So until we change Measure 11, which I hope we will, for now we have to work within those constraints. But it may well be possible. The AICs will be able to apply for MRAC review after we get through this initial pilot period of 2 years. And then there may be other options for them to get released through the governor or through the local court, or something like that. So that in a nutshell is where we are. I think Zach maybe can add something about the work group that's been working on this. It's been a good group, actually, and I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get this through in the February session. February session is a short session, so it's always a challenge there. But I think given all the work that we've been doing, and the fact that we had a first run at this last year in the long session, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get it done this time, and it will really be beneficial. And I will say just finally, aside from providing some really humane treatment to people who are seriously ill and really can't independently perform their lives without assistance, getting them on the outside is actually going to save the system a lot of money, because when they're inside our facilities, they don't qualify for federal medical support, through Medicaid or Medicare. Once they're outside, they do qualify for that. And it's actually going to save DOC and the state a lot of money. So it will cost a little money, some money, because we will want to compensate these physicians and nurses, nurse practitioners, physicians assistants who are going to be on this MRAC. We want to compensate them for the time that they're volunteering to do this, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the amount that we'll save, and it's the right thing to do for for our brothers and sisters and their families.
Thanks, Senator Dembrow. We just wanted to thank Rep. Reynolds for her time. She didn't need to sign off. Zach, did you have some thoughts to weigh in on compassionate release?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll channel Rep. Reynolds' thoughts here, who's a medical professional pediatrician. And so I do want to just highlight a fact that Senator Dembro did touch on, which is that it's really novel to have a medical professional committee, a committee of medical professionals reviewing these conditions and these AICs for release. And so I think one of the values here is to flip the script, let's say, on how the process currently works and works in many states where you have a board of parole who are not medical professionals for the most part, or mainly, and they're doing this kind of medical analysis that's required under whatever statute currently exists, either in Oregon or other states. And they're not necessarily qualified to do that. And so it puts them in a tough position, having to essentially put on a medical hat that they don't have to evaluate these cases. And so I think that is an important flip, where now instead of having that kind of the public safety analysis first and then kind of a subsequent medical analysis by non-medical professionals, now it's a really robust medical professional review. Then it goes to, if the person then qualifies based on this medical review, then it goes to a rebuttable presumption of public safety. And that's where the board does specialize and works in every day, which is kind of the risk assessment, public safety assessment for individuals. So I think that's really the important flip here. And based on our conversations with some national groups, it doesn't sound like this process exists in any other state currently. And I think it's really important to just highlight how robust that this process is going to be, since you have medical professionals doing this review. In terms of the work group that we worked with, I would say it's probably the most productive work group I've been a part of. I haven't been in the position too long, since last session, I guess. And we've had a kind of wide array of groups, alphabet soup, so DOJ, Department of Justice, Department of Corrections, Board of Parole, Community Corrections has been a part of that. Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, OPSR, have been a huge partner for us advocating on this bill. And so all that is to say, we've had a lot of meetings. I know Maida had to sign off and Rep. Reynolds had to sign off, but Maida has really done a great job getting us all together consistently. And I think the bill, I know the bill is in a much better place for that. And so I will say that, especially Department of Justice on this has really done a great job working with us on language to make sure that, when this bill does pass, it can be implemented and is constitutional, which is an important piece of legislation. So, that's kind of what I would add. I would just add that I would also say that the current system just isn't working. Senator Dembro highlighted a few points in that. And it's just clear that it's not working, and it's clear that the pandemic absolutely shined a light on that issue. So that's, I think, what I would add. I think the bill's in a great position right now.
Thanks, Zach. So I wanted to cover the last of the three bills that OJRC is working on. And Zach, if you can explain the compensation bill and then just why it is so important.
Absolutely. And I know Senator Dembro is a huge supporter of this bill as well, and was just extremely helpful last session when we had some frustrations on it. So I wanted to thank him for that. And I know that he may have some thoughts about the bill as well. So this is a bill, we introduced it last session. Senator Thatcher, who's a Republican, approached the National Innocence Project about a compensation bill, and I'll get into kind of what it means in a second. But and so the National Project reached out to the Oregon Innocence Project, which is a part of the Oregon Justice Resource Center, and so we became involved. And so it was just an interesting bipartisan bill that went forward last session. And unfortunately, like many of the bills that we've talked about, and many of the great policy bills last session, unfortunately did not make it out of the Ways and Means process. And so essentially, we've been working with a coalition of local and national groups and Oregon Exonerees, so individuals who have been found to be innocent of the crimes that they were wrongfully convicted of, to develop the bill. And so we're calling it the Oregon Justice for Exonerees Act. and it would provide compensation for innocent individuals who were wrongfully incarcerated. And so wrongful convictions have dramatically impacted the lives of innocent people in Oregon, right? So upon release, wrongfully convicted Oregonians face a number of immediate financial challenges that impact their ability to survive after wrongful incarceration. This includes housing, transportation, health services, and insurance, mental health treatment, and just other basic needs. And so years of lost income and inability to save for retirement while imprisoned, and then missed educational and career opportunities. An important note is I believe most exonerees, or the average exoneree, is in their mid to late 20s. So not only just prime earning, but also prime networking years for those individuals. And so, and then some continue to struggle with criminal conviction on their record despite their innocence. And so Oregon is currently one of only 13 states that does not compensate innocent people who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned. And so the federal government, District of Columbia, and 37 states have compensation laws. Currently in Oregon, the only way for a wrongfully convicted Oregonian to get financial help and rebuild their lives is through a civil lawsuit, which are costly both for the AIC and for the taxpayers and the government. It's time consuming, and it doesn't provide help when the exoneree most needs it, because it can drag on for years. And so the solution is a universal framework that will provide much needed financial compensation to eligible exonerees. And so just a real quick overview, the Oregon Justice for Exonerees Act, some important provisions of the bill. It provides $65,000 per year of wrongful imprisonment, plus up to $25,000 for every year spent on supervision. So in Oregon, that would be post-prison supervision, probation, or sex offender registry. It provides access to non-monetary services, which includes counseling, housing assistance, and personal financial literacy assistance. And then it would ensure a straightforward process for filing claims through the courts. So eligibility is determined by judges and courts, which the National Innocence Project has, through studies, has identified as the most productive and streamlined way to obtain compensation for exonerees. And then lastly, it seals records associated with the wrongful arrest and conviction, and provides exonerees with a certificate of innocence, so they can clear their names and move on with their lives. It's a huge issue for people coming out, even if they're exonerated. The system doesn't necessarily catch up quickly, and so they're trying to rebuild their lives with a conviction that is no longer valid on the records. So that's a quick overview of the bill, or not, maybe not quick. That's an overview of the bill. And I don't know if Senator Dembro, if you want to add anything in that.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is, I think there was surprisingly broad support for this bill last time, actually. As Zach mentioned, there was, some bipartisan leadership. Senator Thatcher is the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. We sent it to Ways and Means, which where, I just have to say that last session, we had a lot going on in Ways and Means, more than usual, because we had a lot of federal COVID money that had to be allocated, and it was even harder than in our usual. It's always hard to get through Ways and Means, but it was particularly hard last time, and this bill never actually got a hearing in Ways and Means. As did a lot of, and a lot of others, it was the same case, and it was just, we ran out of time. So, I'm optimistic again that this is something that, that we should be able to get through. There were some initial thoughts about its costliness, and it's, the cost is not going to be substantial, and it is very much needed by those who have to live with the consequences of this mistake, a mistake that others made.
Thanks, Senator. So I wanted to, before we look back on 2021, just maybe Zach, if you can fill us in on just generally like the timeline of the short session and then what to expect, so that as our supporters are looking to contact legislators and kind of, push some more public education out, just what to expect for the short session with these bills.
Sure. So luckily the short session itself defines itself. So, right, so it's a short session. It's not very long. It's basically the month of February with, I think, the first week of March. And I'm sure Senator Dembro can add any pieces that I forget here. But yeah, so essentially we should be getting final drafts back by the deadline, which is January 10th. And then January 14th, I believe, is the deadline to get to submit the pre-session bills. And so once the session starts, which I believe is February 1st, it becomes kind of a race to get it through the policy committee. So I think I know all these bills are going to be in the Judiciary Committee, either in the House or the Senate. And if it gets a fiscal impact statement attached to it, then it would go to Ways and Means. Again, this is all within maybe a few weeks period within the month. So I think the important thing to highlight is that January is the month of action, right? January is the month with the holidays coming up, things slow down, but January is the month to really gain momentum, contact legislators, let them know what bills are, do you support, which bills would you like to talk to them about? You can always request a meeting with your legislator to discuss the legislation that you're interested in. So, and then once the session hits, again with the short session, it's hard to do much within the session. So it really is important in January to put all the effort into building momentum on the bill. I don't know, Senator Demmer, if you have any thoughts on what gets you to move on a bill, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say stop in January. Start in January, but keep going in February is what I would say. Everything is very intense in that February session, where normally during a long session, legislators have an unlimited number of bills that they can introduce. In the short session, that number is really restricted. We only get 2 personal bills ourselves. Compassionate medical release is one of my 2 bills. And the voting rights bill is one of Rep. Reynolds' 2 bills. And so, there's a smaller number of bills to attend to, which can be a good thing, right? But at the same time, because of the fast timelines, that bill has to get out of its first committee in maybe 10 days, which is just, it's kind of mind-boggling for those who are used to a long session. And it just means that it's very intense, and the squeaky wheel will often get attended to. And so the more you all out there can squeak, the better it'll be for us.
Thanks, Senator. Yeah, with our other panels, we were able to look back on the year of 2021. So we want to make sure we do that. I know it's on the cusp of the short session, so we wanted to make sure we push this out, make sure that our community members are aware of these 3 bills of restoring voting rights, compassionate release, and compensation. So thanks so much for weighing in on that. And we will be pushing out on social media on how to support. So I wanted to conclude on, looking back at the last session, specifically on criminal justice reform. So Zach, I have our annual report pulled up with the various bills that you all had worked on, but I want to make sure that we debrief Senate Bill 836 regarding alternative incarceration programs, and that Senator Dembro, I know you were the chief sponsor, so if you could unpack for us that bill and policy.
Yeah. So just returning to the stresses of COVID, So that bill was focused on what's called AIP, Alternative Incarceration Programs, which are programs that are offered for AICs. Many of them having to do with mental health, addictions, those kinds of things, and people come into the facilities to work with AICs, to give classes and, to work with them in some cases one-on-one, as well as in small groups. Very, very important. And in many cases, a person's release is connected to their successful completion of those programs. Well, COVID, made it difficult for, for those programs to exist, because right now, and I will say this is something we're working on changing, but right now, AICs generally don't have access to online kinds of learning. And if they did, then this is something where, these programs could have continued without skipping a beat, really. But because they required people to come in and they couldn't come in, that put these programs on hold. And for, in many cases, long periods of time. And for some AICs, that had a negative effect on their potential release. And so this bill 836 was designed to really get out in front of that going forward, and to make sure that, if a program had to be suspended, that, the light bulb would be turned on, people would know what's going on, there would be report to the legislature, we would be on top of it. And ideally, the DOC would find alternative ways of making sure that the programming is happening, even if they have to get creative about it. And again, so one of the bills, this is kind of an aside, one of the bills that we introduced last session would have, and this is within the realm of prison education, it would have created pilot programs at 2 of our prisons, Coffee Creek in the Valley, the women's prison, and Snake River in far eastern Oregon, which would have gotten internet into those facilities. And we could start working on potentially actually statewide delivery of instruction. One of the bills that we did pass last session, Senate Bill 234, has to do with the Second Chance Pell program. I don't know if all of you out there may not know, but it used to be that AICs were eligible for federal financial aid. And so they could pursue training programs, education programs that were offered through colleges and universities, and the tuition would have been paid for through federal financial aid. That went away in the early 90s during the dark years of tough on crime. And but one of the silver linings of COVID actually is that Congress, when it was passing the COVID relief money a year ago, somebody managed to get an amendment attached to that bill restoring this program. It's called Second Chance Pell. So it's coming back, and we want to make sure that it is really well used. And so it directs our Higher Ed Coordinating Commission and different colleges and universities. It includes a couple of formerly incarcerated people to look at how we can make best use of this new program. And they're just finishing up their report to the legislature now. One of their recommendations is internet in every facility. And that is a very exciting prospect. So I'm hopeful we can get there. I will say one last thing if I can, and that is one of the big initiatives that we're looking at for the February session. This is coming from the governor. It's a big workforce development bill, something to address the shortage that we have in skilled workers right now. We're really feeling it acutely, again, as a result of COVID. And the purpose of this bill would be to, actually right now they're looking at a $200 million investment to remove barriers for people who want to do training or education programs, especially short-term programs that can get them into the workforce right away. But they're not able to do it because they face barriers around childcare or housing or, just income, while they're taking the time to be trained. Unless it's an apprenticeship, they're not getting paid to do this. So that's what this bill would do. And it focuses on several target populations. One of them is, just BIPOC Oregonians in general, veterans, rural Oregonians, and I'm happy to say that we did add current and formerly incarcerated Oregonians to that target. And so, I really love the potential that we're looking at in terms of blending education and training inside the facilities with outside. And so some of these funds that I think will be able to be used to improve prison education, but also to create, a lot of support for AICs for further training and education on the outside.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thanks so much, Senator.
Sure.
So Zach, did you want to weigh in on the previous session and different takeaways and the work that OJRC was involved in? And then we can wrap up shortly after that.
Absolutely. I never miss a chance to weigh in. So just real quick to Senator Dembro's point about barriers that exist both in prison and out, just an anecdote from my life is even after graduating law school and passing the bar, I found out that I couldn't be a notary. So even as a practicing attorney, I was barred from being a notary at that time. So it was just an interesting observation that I made where no matter, even when you think you reach a point where, you're not going to maybe encounter obstacles, you still do. And so I still encounter obstacles as we're seeing with some Department of Corrections policies coming down right now as well that are causing some concerns. So we really appreciate that work, Senator Dembro, and getting the group for formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated included in that. So,
and Zach, can I just add, you should also keep your eyes open for a committee bill in the Judiciary Committee, Senate Judiciary, around removing barriers to licensure. We are looking at those. Oregon has been identified as a state with significant barriers that don't need to be there. And so, I'm hoping that we will emerge from the session with some real progress on that problem. Because, it's great to be trained, but if you can't then, work in that profession, it's just setting people up for frustration.
Absolutely, especially when one of the best fits for a job may be someone with personal experience
Exactly.
with involvement in the criminal justice system. So we will definitely keep an eye out for that and support that. And, speaking of that, I think the bills that I wanted to touch on from last session, Senator Dembro supported all of them. So he may remember them and feel free to weigh in. I think, so SB 836 was a huge success. And I know Senator Dembro helped us a ton, and Aileen with his office, who is no longer at the office, but I do want to shout out the incredible work she did on that bill. it also was important to me because before I came to OJRC, I was a family advocate at the Pathfinder Network doing work with justice-involved families. And while I wasn't involved in kind of the negotiations with this project, but the Pathfinder Network had an AIP program at Coffee Creek that was shut down at the very beginning of the pandemic, or terminated at the beginning of the pandemic, really with no notice. And because essentially my understanding was that they didn't necessarily want to run correspondence classes, which goes to that internet issue, Senator Dembro. So, and that was really just arresting for me to see that. It was kind of surprising, and it stayed with me. And so when I heard that there was a possibility of working on this bill, I really wanted to be a part of it, because that potentially wouldn't happen now with SB 836 on the books. So that's really hoping that it helps. I mean, I think the other thing too that we saw is we just heard stories, as Senator Dembro highlighted, stories of individuals who their release date was pushed back, they lost their release date, and then things happen in their life that they missed, that they could have been out and experiencing or addressing. So I think the only one of the ones I would highlight, I think there was a slew of policing bills that had a range, I think, of effectiveness. I think that it was good to see the commitment to reforming policing. I think so HB 3145 was a bill that we worked on mainly with Rep. Bynum's office, which requires law enforcement to report any discipline resulting in economic sanctions against a police officer, to report that to the DPSST, Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, for publication on their public database. And we've received some recent feedback from defense attorneys who actually have found that helpful. So it didn't get exactly where we wanted it. It was definitely significantly different from what we were hoping to get out of the bill, but it is still good the reminder is still good that even small wins make a huge difference in practice. And so we were happy to hear that some defense attorneys were able to take advantage of the information that's now public in the database. SB 418, Senator Dembro probably remembers this one. This was a bill that prohibits coercion and other forms of deceit by law enforcement when interviewing youth under certain circumstances. And there's some more technicalities to it, but essentially, says that police officers can't lie to youth in interrogations. And so this was a bill, I believe Senator Gorsuch was the chief sponsor on it, and I know Senator Dembro is a sponsor as well on the bill. So it was a first in nation bill. I guess technically we lost Illinois by a couple days, but it really was a huge bill to get passed, and I know they had tried previously to pass it. So that was, I think, a pretty significant win in the legislature, and I would love to see it expanded to not just youth, but to anyone dealing with law enforcement. SJR 10 asked that the people to vote to modernize the Oregon Constitution through an amendment to abolish a provision, and that provision in the Oregon Constitution allows for involuntary servitude and slavery. Senator Dembro, I know, was involved in that as well, and I believe that's going to be on the ballot coming up. So it's really exciting to see, and I know there's groups that are doing great advocacy work on that. And then lastly, I would just highlight SB 817, which again, I believe Senator Dembro also was involved with, which eliminates fees, court costs, and fines associated with juvenile delinquency matters, and provides for court-appointed counsel at state expense in all matters, and then removes some other financial barriers to youth and their parents who generally bear the burden of the brunt of the fines and fees in juvenile court. So another huge youth justice win. There was an expungement bill that passed that was also significant. So I mean, and SB 819 was another significant bill. Hopefully, if DAs use it to its fullest extent, it could make a huge difference in having cases be addressed quickly to right wrongs in sentencing and other areas as well. So those are the bills that I would highlight running up against time here.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, it's so important to remember the wins as we look to, build more in the future to really transform our criminal legal system. I want to thank our speakers for today, Rep. Reynolds, Senator Dembrow, and Zach Winston of OJRC. And I'm just going to do a quick plug here to remember to follow our socials. You can donate at ojrc.info/donate to continue to support our policy work as well as legal work and the various different areas that we're involved in. Tomorrow we will have a panel on policing. We will have our very own Juan Chavez as well as the activist and organizer DeRay McKesson. So that will be at 1 o'clock on Twitter Spaces. And yeah, we just invite you to follow our socials as we continue to push out these bills. So we hope that today was educational and that you were able to take away what we have coming down the pike, as well as the incredible work that we been a part of in 2021. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.